No one knocked on Thaddeus Blackwood's door in December, not in the high country of Wyoming, not when the wind could peel skin from bone and the snow could bury a man so deep he would not be found until spring. So when the sound came through the night, a weak, uneven thud against his wooden door, Thaddeus did not move at first. He only sat still by the fire, his revolver half cleaned in his hands, and listened like a hunted animal. The winter of 1888 had taken the Bighorn Mountains and made them cruel. Snow had fallen for 3 days without mercy, turning the world into a white wall that swallowed trails, fences, and even the horizon. The wind screamed through cracks in the cabin like it had teeth. Thaddeus had lived 15 hard winters on his ranch, tucked against a granite wall, and he trusted the weather more than he trusted people. Weather could kill you, sure, but it never pretended to be your friend first. He was 42 now, built wide from labor and loneliness. His buffalo coat hung near the door, stiff with frost. A string of small feathers and charms hung from his belt, old habits from old days, the kind you kept when you had nobody left to argue with you. His father's Henry rifle rested above the fireplace, clean and ready. Everything in his cabin had been earned the hard way, and everything reminded him why he lived alone. Illness had taken his parents years ago. A land fight had taken his brother, and a woman named Eleanor had taken the last soft piece of him when she chose a rich cattleman over a rancher who had nothing but dirt under his nails and hope in his chest. After that, Thaddeus decided the mountains were better company. They asked for nothing. They promised nothing. They could not leave you once you let yourself believe. Another knock came, softer this time. Then a scratch, like someone's glove sliding down the wood. Thaddeus set the revolver on the table and stood. His boots made no sound on the worn floorboards. His hand found the gun at his hip, cold and familiar. No one came up here in winter unless they were lost, desperate, or dangerous. Then he heard a voice. "Please," a woman whispered. The word was thin, shaking, almost swallowed by the wind, but it was human. That changed everything. Outlaws could fake a limp, fake a cry, fake a story, but that voice sounded like the edge of death. Thaddeus walked to the door, lifted the heavy bar, and cracked it open with his revolver raised. 2 bodies lay on his porch, half buried in snowdrift. Not men. Women. And not dressed for Wyoming. Their coats were wrong for this land. Their shoes too light, their hair dark and wet against pale faces. They wore matching blue silk dresses under torn outer layers and bright red scarves that looked like the only living color left in the world. They were identical. Like mirrors dropped into the snow, Thaddeus froze for one short breath, not from fear, but from shock. Then the wind shoved more snow into the doorway, and he snapped back to life. He holstered his gun and threw the door wide. "Get up!" he barked, more harsh than he meant. "You freeze, you die." One woman tried to push herself up, but her arms gave out and her head sagged. The other's lips were blue, her lashes clumped with ice. Thaddeus did not think after that. He grabbed the nearest one under the arms, hauled her inside, and laid her near the fire. He turned back, scooped the second one like a child, and dragged her over the threshold. He kicked the door shut and dropped the bar into place. The cabin felt smaller with them in it. The air felt different, charged and unsteady. Both women shivered so hard their teeth clicked like stones. Thaddeus pulled blankets from his bed and piled them over the women until only their faces showed. He moved fast, the way a man moves when he refuses to admit he cares. "You need warm drink," he said. "Tea, coffee, something." He turned his back to give them a scrap of privacy and put a kettle on. Behind him came the faint rustle of wet cloth, sharp little gasps as feeling returned to numb hands. He kept his eyes on the stove, but his mind ran hard. Where did they come from? The nearest town was far. The pass was dangerous in summer and deadly in winter, and nobody wore silk in a blizzard unless they had stepped out of a different world by mistake. When he turned back, both women were sitting up, pressed close under the blankets like they were one body split in two. Their eyes were dark, wide, and tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. They looked young, maybe mid-20s, but fear had carved lines into their faces. Thaddeus handed them tin cups. "Drink," he said. The woman on the left took the cup with shaking hands. Her English was clear, only slightly accented. "Thank you," she whispered. "My name is May. This is my sister, Leanne." Thaddeus nodded once, like names could explain anything. Thaddeus Blackwood. Leanne took a sip and broke into quiet tears, the kind that came when the body realized it had survived. May wrapped an arm around her without looking, like she had done it 1,000 times. "We walked from the pass," May said. "Our wagon went over. The driver did not live." Thaddeus's jaw tightened. He had seen wagons smashed like toys up here. "You saw my smoke," he said. May nodded. "We had nowhere else." Quote. Leanne lifted her eyes, and her voice came out small. "We are running from men." That made Thaddeus go still again. Men could mean anything. Men could mean greed, hunger, cruelty, or all of it together. "We have no money," May said quickly, as if she could read the wall in his face. "But we can work. We can clean, cook, mend. Please don't put us outside." Thaddeus looked at the window. Snow piled against the glass. The storm was still alive. If he sent them back out, he would be sending them to die. He told himself it was only that. Only common sense. Only decency. Not softness. "You stay until the storm breaks," he said. "No charity. You pull your weight when you can." Leanne's shoulders sagged like she had been holding up the sky. "You are kind," she whispered. Thaddeus grunted. "I'm warm and dry. That's all you need right now." That night he gave them his bed and took the chair by the fire, rifle across his lap. He told himself it was for safety. He told himself strangers were dangerous. He told himself a man alone had to be careful. But the truth sat in the room with him. The truth was that the cabin did not feel empty anymore, and that scared him more than the storm. Morning came pale and slow. The wind eased, but the cold stayed. May and Leanne woke early and moved through his tiny kitchen like they already knew it. They used his flour and bacon and beans, and somehow they made it taste like something worth living for. The smell filled the cabin, pushing back 10 years of stale coffee and silence. Thaddeus ate without speaking for a long moment. Then he set his cup down. "All right," he said. "Tell me the real thing. Who are you running from?" May and Leanne shared a look. It was fast, practiced, and heavy with old pain. May swallowed. "Have you heard of a man named Barnaby Finch?" Thaddeus's eyes narrowed. He had heard that name. A rich railroad man, the kind who bought whole towns when he got bored. Leanne's hands tightened around her cup. "He calls us his property." The word hit the cabin like a gunshot. Thaddeus felt heat rise in his chest, sharp and ugly. May's voice stayed steady, but her eyes begged. "He will send men for us." Outside, the dogs began to bark, not playful, not curious. A deep warning bark that made every hair on Thaddeus's neck lift at once. He stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. His hand went to his rifle, because in the mountains, the storm was never the only danger. The barking outside did not stop. It turned into a deep warning sound that told Thaddeus the dogs were not chasing a rabbit. They were smelling men. Thaddeus grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace and stepped to the window. Snow still fell, but the wind had eased just enough to let shapes move through the white. 3 riders were coming up the slope, slow and steady, like they already knew they owned the ground they rode on. May and Leanne stood behind him, wrapped in blankets, their faces tight with fear. Thaddeus did not ask if they recognized the riders. He could feel the answer in the way Leanne's hands shook and the way May's eyes locked on the door like it might bite her. "Get back," Thaddeus said. "Stay out of sight." Quote. May started to speak, but he cut her off with a look. He was not used to giving orders to anyone, but the mountain had taught him one lesson well. A man who waits to act does not get a second chance. He opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. Cold slapped his face. Snow crunched under his boots. He worked the lever on his rifle so the sound carried, sharp and clear in the open air. The riders slowed. The lead man wore a tin star on his coat. Even from the porch, Thaddeus could see that star did not make the man honest. Sheriff Amos Pike sat tall in his saddle like he had never done a day of hard work in his life, but his eyes were flat and hungry. Two deputies rode behind him, both with faces that looked built for trouble. "That's far enough, Pike," Thaddeus called out. Pike stopped his horse near the fence line and smiled like they were old friends. "Thaddeus Blackwood," he said. "Still living like a bear in a cave. Still wearing a badge you didn't earn," Thaddeus said, keeping the rifle steady. Pike's smile held, but his eyes sharpened. "Now, there's no need for that tone. I'm out here on business." "No one rides up here in a storm for friendly talk," Thaddeus said. "Say it, and be gone." Pike leaned forward on his saddle horn. "There was a wagon accident near the pass. 2 Chinese girls were in it. Twins. Valuable shipment. A man named Barnaby Finch is offering a reward for their safe return." Thaddeus felt something hard twist in his chest. He did not show it. "I haven't seen anyone." One deputy with a long scar on his cheek sniffed the air. "I smell smoke," he muttered. "Someone's in there." Pike lifted a hand like he was calming a child. "Thad, you always were stubborn, but you wouldn't lie to the law, would you? Let us take a quick look. If you got nothing to hide, it'll be over in a minute." Thaddeus's voice dropped low. "This isn't a town street. This is my land. You cross that fence line, and you're trespassing." Pike's smile faded. "Finch pays well, Thad. Real well, and I hear you ain't rich. Maybe you'd rather take the money than take a fight." Thaddeus did not blink. "I'd rather take the fight." Pike's horse shifted, uneasy, in the cold. Pike glanced at his deputies like he was measuring the space between them and the porch. "You're making a mistake," he said. Before Thaddeus could answer, the cabin door behind him creaked open. His stomach dropped. He had told them to stay back. May and Leanne stepped onto the porch, one on each side of the doorway, holding 2 old shotguns Thaddeus kept near the back wall. The guns looked heavy in their hands, but their faces were steady. The red scarves were tied around their necks again, bright against the white snow, like a warning flag. Pike laughed, mean and loud. "Well, look at that. Finch's lost property walked right into my lap." May's voice rang out clear. "We are not property." Leanne lifted the shotgun higher. Her hands shook, but the barrel did not. "We are not going back." Pike's eyes moved over them like a man looking at a prize horse. "Put the guns down, girls. You don't want this to end bad." Thaddeus raised his rifle an inch. "It ends bad if you push." Pike's jaw tightened. His right hand drifted toward his pistol. "Last chance, Thad." Thaddeus did not wait to see if he meant it. He fired once. The shot cracked through the cold, and Pike's hat flew off his head and spun into the snow. Pike jerked back like he had been slapped. His deputies cursed and reached for their guns, but Pike threw his hand up fast. "Easy," Pike snapped, more angry than scared, but he had learned something in that moment. Thaddeus Blackwood was not bluffing. Thaddeus kept the rifle aimed at Pike's chest. "Next one takes your ear," he said, "or worse, turn around and ride out." Pike's face went red. "You're choosing a hard road, Thad. Finch won't forget this." "I don't care what Finch remembers," Thaddeus said. Pike backed his horse a step, then another. His deputies followed, glaring like dogs pulled off a bone. "We'll be back," Pike called. "We'll bring enough men to burn that cabin down. You hear me." Thaddeus did not answer. He watched them turn and ride away, their hooves throwing up snow as they disappeared into the trees. When they were gone, the silence came back. But it was not the same silence as before. It was the silence after a door gets kicked open. It never fits right again. May lowered the shotgun and let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in her chest for years. "I am sorry," she said. "We did not want to bring this to you." Thaddeus looked at the empty trail where Pike had ridden. "Trouble finds people," he said. "Sometimes it just takes a while." Leanne's eyes were wet. "He will return." Thaddeus nodded. "Sooner than you think. A man like Pike doesn't leave empty-handed unless he plans to come back with more hands." May stepped closer. "What do we do?" Thaddeus glanced at the cabin behind him. The fire, the food, the safety he had built with his own hands. For the first time in years, the place felt like it could be taken from him in one night. "We leave," he said. "Not down the pass, not to town, up." Leanne frowned. "Up where?" Thaddeus pointed toward the high ridge where the rocks cut the sky. "There's a cave up there. I stalked it years ago in case I ever had to run from men. Looks like that day finally came." May's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at him like she was seeing the truth of him for the first time. "You planned for this." "I planned for the world to prove me right," he said. "Now move. Pack light. Bullets, food, water, blankets. And you both wear boots that won't kill you." They worked fast. Thaddeus filled a sack with dried meat and beans. He grabbed extra ammunition and his small medical kit. May and Leanne filled canteens and wrapped what they could carry. Their hands moved quick, and they did not waste time with fear. Fear had brought them here. It would not keep them here. When they stepped outside, the snow had eased to a thin fall. The sky was turning the color of cold steel. Thaddeus led them into the drifts on snowshoes, cutting a trail toward the pass first, then bending hard toward the ridge where horses could not go. Behind them, the cabin stood dark and small against the white land, smoke still rising from the chimney like a signal. Thaddeus did not like signals. He kept moving higher and higher until the trees thinned and the rock walls closed in. The air burned their lungs. Leanne limped once, but May took her arm and they kept climbing. By the time they reached the cave, night had fallen. They huddled inside under furs and blankets, their breath thick in the cold air. Thaddeus sat near the mouth of the cave, watching the valley below with his rifle across his knees. Then he saw it. A glow far down the slope. Small at first, then growing. Flames. His cabin, his roof, his porch, his chimney light, all turning orange and hungry in the dark. May's hand found his sleeve. Leanne's hand found his other arm. Neither spoke, because there were no simple words for watching a home burn. Thaddeus stared at the fire until his eyes hurt. Then he swallowed hard. "They came quicker," he said, voice rough. "And that means they ain't done." The fire down in the valley burned for a long time. It ate the roof first, then the walls, then the life Thaddeus had built, board by board. From the cave, it looked small, like a campfire. But he knew every flame was taking something that once belonged to him. The bed he had slept in, the table he ate at, the jars he saved for winter. Gone. All because he opened his door to two freezing strangers. May and Leanne did not speak while they watched. Their faces were tight with guilt, but Thaddeus did not let them carry that weight alone. He had lived without them for years, but the truth was simple. If he had left them on the porch, he would have lost something worse than a cabin. He would have lost what was left of his soul. When the flames finally dropped low, the darkness returned, thick and cold. The wind whispered along the rocks like it was listening. Thaddeus stayed awake until his eyes ached. He heard the valley before he saw it, voices carried in the thin air, boots crunching on snow, horses snorting far below. Pike had brought men, just like he promised. At first light, the ridge began to move. Shadows climbed where shadows should not climb. Thaddeus held the mouth of the cave like it was a fort, rifle ready, jaw clenched. May and Leanne crouched behind him, their shotguns loaded, their faces pale but steady. "Stay low," Thaddeus said. "Only fire when you see white in their eyes." May nodded once. Leanne swallowed hard. She pressed her red scarf around her neck like it was armor. A shout echoed up from below. "Blackwood," Pike's voice called. "I know you're up there. You can't hide on rock forever." Thaddeus did not answer. He watched the slopes and counted movement. Too many, at least 8, maybe more. They spread out, climbing in a loose line, using boulders and trees for cover. Pike was not smart, but he had learned one thing. Numbers can replace skill. A gunshot cracked. The bullet hit stone near the cave mouth and threw dust into the air. Another shot followed. Then another. They were testing the cave, trying to make him duck, trying to make him waste ammo. Thaddeus waited until he saw a man's shoulder behind a pine trunk. Then he fired once. The man fell backward without a sound. The ridge went quiet for one breath, like the mountain itself held still. Then the shooting started for real. Bullets struck rock and chipped stone. Snow exploded in small bursts as rounds hit the ground. Thaddeus kept his body tight to the cave wall, firing only when he had a clear shot. He had the high ground, but the high ground did not stop hunger, money, and cruelty. May crawled closer to the mouth of the cave, eyes sharp. "They are trying to go around," she warned. Thaddeus followed her gaze. Two men were climbing a narrow crack in the rocks to the left, moving slow and careful. If they reached the top, they could shoot straight into the cave. "Leanne," Thaddeus said, "watch that left side. If you see a head, you drop it." Leanne's lips trembled, but her eyes did not. She shifted her shotgun and aimed at the crack. Minutes passed like hours. The gunfire came in waves. Pike's men would shoot, then move, then shoot again. Thaddeus hit another man in the leg when he tried to rush forward. The man screamed and slid down the slope, leaving a dark stain in the snow. Pike shouted again, "You're making this worse, Thad. Give me the girls and I'll let you walk away." Thaddeus spat into the cave dust. "You don't decide what I walk away from." Pike answered with a hard laugh. "Then you die up there with them." A loud crack sounded, closer than before. A bullet snapped past the cave mouth and made May flinch. Thaddeus turned his head just in time to see something else. Another pair of men had started climbing the right side, using a line of rocks to get closer. "They are splitting," May whispered. "That means they're scared," Thaddeus said. "Good." But fear did not stop them. It only made them meaner. A man with a scarred face crawled up behind a boulder and raised his rifle. Thaddeus fired first. The man dropped flat, but he was not hit. He rolled away fast and shouted to the others. Then, the real problem hit Thaddeus like ice water. He was counting bullets now, not targets. His ammo bag felt lighter. The fight had been longer than he hoped, and Pike had more men than he expected. Leanne's breathing turned sharp. "Thaddeus," she whispered, "left side." One of the climbers on the left crack reached the top. His fingers hooked the ledge. His head rose into view. Leanne stood up and fired. The shotgun blast thundered off the rocks. The man jerked back, lost his grip, and fell. His scream bounced through the canyon until it ended. Leanne's hands shook so badly the barrel dipped. May grabbed her arm to steady her. "You did it," May said, voice tight. "You did it." Leanne looked like she might throw up, but she nodded and forced herself back down behind the wall. Thaddeus felt a strange pain in his chest, not from a bullet, but from pride. These women were not weak. Finch and Pike could call them property all they wanted, but property did not stand and fight. Another shot cracked and hit the cave wall, sending stone chips into Thaddeus's face. He blinked hard. His shoulder tightened. "They're getting closer," May said. Thaddeus leaned out and fired at a moving shape. The man ducked. Another man ran for a tree. Thaddeus fired again and missed. He cursed under his breath, not because he missed, but because he wasted a round. Then something happened that changed the whole fight. A single bullet hit the rock near Thaddeus and bounced in a bad angle. It slammed into his shoulder like a hammer. Thaddeus grunted and stumbled backward. His rifle clattered to the cave floor. Pain spread hot and thick down his arm, and for a second, the world narrowed to fire and darkness. "Thaddeus!" May shouted. Leanne screamed his name. They grabbed him under the arms and dragged him deeper into the cave. Blood soaked into his coat fast, dark against the fur lining. Leanne ripped her red scarf without hesitation and pressed it hard against the wound. "Hold still," she said, voice shaking. "You must hold still." Thaddeus tried to lift his arm and failed. His fingers went numb. He ground his teeth and forced his voice out. "Don't let him in." May crawled back toward the cave mouth with the shotgun. She did not look like a frightened runaway anymore. She looked like someone who decided she would rather die than be owned. Outside, Pike's voice rose loud and pleased. He could smell the change. "That sounded good," he yelled. "You finally bleeding, Blackwood. Now listen close. You send the girls down, and I might let you die quick. You don't, and I'll make it slow." May's eyes flashed. She shouted back, "We are not going with you." Pike laughed. "Then you all die together." The shooting began again. Bullets struck rock, and snow drifted into the cave in little puffs. May fired once, and the sound rolled hard through the canyon. A man yelled below. But they kept coming. Thaddeus leaned against the back wall, fighting to stay awake. He could feel the blood loss. The cold made it worse. Leanne kept pressure on the scarf, her hands red now, her face pale. "We cannot win," Leanne whispered, tears running down her cheeks. "We cannot." Thaddeus forced his eyes open. "We can," he said, but he did not know if it was truth or stubbornness. Then, through the gunfire, a new sound rolled across the valley. Not a rifle crack. A deeper boom, heavy as thunder. One of Pike's men on the ridge jerked sideways and dropped like his strings got cut. Pike screamed, "What was that?" Another boom answered. Another man fell. May lifted her head, eyes wide. Leanne froze, still holding the scarf to Thaddeus's shoulder. Thaddeus stared toward the far ridge through the cave mouth, fighting to focus. A dark shape stood high on the opposite rocks, a man-sized shadow with a long gun that looked too big for any ordinary hunter. And whoever it was, he was shooting at Pike's men. The deep boom came again, shaking the canyon like thunder. Another one of Pike's men dropped hard into the snow, and the rest froze in confusion. They had come up that ridge, thinking they were hunting 3 trapped people. Now they were the ones being hunted. Thaddeus forced himself forward, jaw clenched against the pain in his shoulder. He leaned just enough to see across the valley. On the far ridge stood a huge man with a wild beard and a long rifle braced against his shoulder. The gun looked like it belonged in a war, not on a mountain. The man fired again, and the sound rolled through the rocks like a drum. Thaddeus knew that rifle. He knew that shape. "Ezra," he rasped. May stared at him. "Who?" "My neighbor," Thaddeus said, voice rough. "Ezra Miller. Mean as a badger, but he hates bullies more than he hates breathing." Outside, Pike's voice turned sharp with panic. "Who's up there? Show yourself." Ezra's answer came as a shout that carried clean across the frozen air. "You boys are trespassing," he roared. "And you are interrupting my breakfast." 2 more shots followed, fast and heavy, and Pike's men dove for cover. They started firing back, but they were shooting uphill at a man they could barely see, and Ezra had the better rock, the better aim, and the kind of patience only old mountain men had. Then new gunfire cracked from a second spot. Ezra was not alone. 3 figures appeared behind him, younger men moving like they had done this their whole lives. Ezra's sons. They opened fire in a steady rhythm, not wasting shots, not yelling, just working. Pike's men started to panic. They had the cave in front of them and Ezra on their side. Crossfire. No good cover, no way to rush without getting cut down. Thaddeus felt May and Leanne shift behind him, still ready, still holding their guns. He could see the fear in their faces, but he also saw something else. Relief. A lifeline. Pike shouted, "Fall back! Fall back!" His deputies hesitated, then began to slide and scramble down the slope. One man dragged another by the coat. Another dropped his rifle and raised his hands, begging for mercy from the rocks. Thaddeus pushed himself up, using the cave wall for support. Pain stabbed through him, but he kept his eyes on Pike. The sheriff was backing away too, but his face was twisted with rage. He was not thinking about survival. He was thinking about losing. Pike looked up and screamed, "Blackwood, this ain't over." Thaddeus lifted his revolver with his good hand. His arm shook from blood loss, but his eyes stayed locked on Pike. He did not aim at Pike's chest. He aimed lower. He fired once. The shot hit the rock under Pike's boot. The sheriff's foot slipped. For 1 second, he flailed like a man on ice. Then he went down hard, sliding and tumbling over loose stone and frozen snow. He crashed into a pine tree with a sound that made May gasp. Pike did not get up. The remaining men stopped fighting right there. 2 dropped their guns. One raised both hands and cried out that he would talk, he would tell everything, just do not shoot him again. Ezra's booming voice rolled across the canyon. "That's enough." Any man still holding a gun is fixing to meet his maker. Silence finally settled, broken only by the wind and the harsh breathing of frightened men. May lowered her shotgun slowly. Her knees buckled, and she sat down hard on the cave floor like her body had been holding itself together on anger alone. Leanne was still pressing the red scarf into Thaddeus's shoulder. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she did not let her hand slip for even a moment. "Stay with us," she whispered. "Please." Thaddeus gave a weak grunt. "I ain't going nowhere." Minutes later, Ezra and his sons climbed up to the cave. Ezra was even bigger up close. His coat was lined with fur, his beard was full of ice, and his eyes were the color of flint. He took one look at Thaddeus's bleeding shoulder and spit into the snow. "Lord have mercy," Ezra said. "Thad, you always did pick the hard road." Thaddeus tried to smile and failed. "You saw the smoke." Ezra's eyes flicked to May and Leanne. He did not stare at them like they were strange things. He stared at them like he was judging their courage. "So these are the girls," he said. May lifted her chin. "Yes." Ezra nodded once. "All right then, we'll talk later. Right now, we get you off this mountain before you bleed out." Ezra's sons moved fast. One of them took Thaddeus under the good arm. Another brought a blanket and wrapped it tight around his shoulders. Leanne refused to leave his side. May refused to let Leanne go alone. So they moved together, step by step, down the ridge. Behind them, two of Pike's men sat in the snow with their hands up, guarded by Ezra's boys. One man kept glancing down the slope like he wanted to run, but the sight of Ezra's rifle kept him still. When they reached the lower trees, Thaddeus's legs started to fail. The world tilted. He heard Leanne's voice calling his name like it was far away. Ezra slapped Thaddeus's face lightly, not kind, but steady. "Stay awake," Ezra growled. "You die on me and I'll drag you back just to yell at you some more." Thaddeus forced his eyes open. "You always were sweet," he muttered. Ezra snorted. "Shut up and breathe." They made it to Ezra's ranch by late afternoon. It was not as high as Thaddeus's place, but it was still rough country. A strong cabin, a big barn, and smoke rising from a chimney like a promise. Ezra's sons carried Thaddeus inside and laid him on a table. Ezra's hands were careful for a man that big. He cleaned the wound, stitched what needed stitching, and wrapped it tight. May and Leanne stood close the whole time. May held the lantern. Leanne held Thaddeus's good hand as if letting go might pull him away. When it was done, Ezra stepped back and wiped his hands. "He'll live," he said. "If he don't do something stupid." May's shoulders sagged in relief. Leanne covered her mouth and cried. Quiet and shaking, Thaddeus drifted in and out for hours. When he finally woke, it was dark. Firelight danced on the walls. The smell of stew filled the room. He heard voices in the other room. Ezra's low voice, one of the sons answering, and May speaking soft but firm. Thaddeus pushed himself up with effort. His shoulders screamed, but he ignored it and listened. Ezra said, "Finch is the kind of man who pays twice, once to buy what he wants, and again to punish whoever takes it from him." May's voice came tight. "He will not stop." Ezra answered, "No, he won't." Then one of Ezra's sons spoke, voice tense. "Pa, there's tracks outside, fresh." The room went still. Ezra's chair scraped the floor. "How many?" "Hard to tell," the son said, "but more than 3, and they're not riding like lost men." May's breath caught. Leanne whispered, "They found us." Thaddeus forced himself to stand, swaying on his feet. Ezra turned and saw him, and his eyes narrowed. "You should be in bed," Ezra said. Thaddeus grabbed the edge of the doorframe to steady himself. "If Finch sent men," he said, "they ain't here to talk." Outside, the dogs began to bark again, deep and angry, and this time the barking was closer than ever. The night held its breath when the new voice cut through the gunfire. "United States Marshal," the man called again. "Drop your weapons. Right now." Lantern light spilled from the trees like a line of stars moving closer. 6 riders pushed forward, rifles up, horses snorting steam into the cold. The lead man wore a dark coat and a hard face that had seen too many dead bodies. His badge caught the light and did not shine like Sheriff Pike's did. This one looked heavy, like it meant something. Wade Rourke's pistol stayed pressed to Thaddeus's ribs, but his confidence cracked. His eyes jumped to the trees, to the riders, to the rifles aimed at his chest. "This ain't your business," Rourke snapped. The marshal did not slow. "It became my business when Barnaby Finch started buying people," he said. "And it became my business when men started burning homes to get them back." May and Leanne stood frozen on the porch, shotguns raised, their faces pale. May's eyes never left the pistol at Thaddeus's side. Leanne's mouth trembled, but she stayed on her feet. Ezra Miller stepped into view from the yard, rifle in his hands, blood on his sleeve from a graze he had not even noticed yet. His sons spread out in the dark like wolves guarding their den. The marshal lifted his voice. "Rourke, you drop the gun, and you walk away alive. You keep it in your hand, and you die in this snow." Rourke swallowed. For 1 second, he looked like he might do the smart thing. Then he moved fast, trying to yank Thaddeus backward as a shield. May screamed, "No!" Leanne fired. The shotgun blast lit the porch in a bright flash. The shot struck the wooden post beside Rourke's head, splintering it, and the shock made Rourke jerk. His grip loosened just enough. Thaddeus used that one moment like it was a gift from God. He slammed his elbow back with all the strength he had left. Rourke grunted and staggered. The pistol slipped away from Thaddeus's ribs. Thaddeus brought his revolver up with his good hand and aimed low. He did not shoot to kill. He shot to stop. The bullet caught Rourke in the thigh. Rourke dropped into the snow with a howl, clutching his leg. The marshal's men surged forward in a rush of boots and shouted orders. 2 rifles stayed aimed at Rourke's head, while another man kicked the fallen pistol away. In seconds, Rourke's hands were tied behind his back. The other men who came with Rourke did not fight once they saw the marshal. One tried to run, but Ezra's son Caleb fired a warning shot that kicked snow up at the man's feet. That was enough. They dropped their guns one by one and raised their hands. The marshal stepped up onto the porch and looked at Thaddeus. His eyes flicked to the bandages, to the blood, to the way Thaddeus stood stiff from pain but refused to sit. "You, Blackwood?" the marshal asked. Thaddeus nodded. "Thaddeus." The marshal gave a short nod back. "Marshal Samuel Hart." Then Hart looked at May and Leanne. He did not look at them like they were strange. He looked at them like they were survivors. "You two," he said gently. "Are you the ones from the wagon?" May's throat worked before her voice came out. "Yes." Leanne's hand still shook on the shotgun. "They said we were property." Hart's face hardened. "Not anymore," he said. "Finch has been under federal watch for months. We got reports from San Francisco about women bought and moved across state lines. We got missing names. We got bribed sheriffs and paid deputies. Pike was one of them." Ezra spat into the snow. "Pike won't be taking bribes now." Hart's eyes shifted toward the dark hills where Pike had fallen earlier. "We heard," he said. "I won't shed tears for him." Thaddeus swallowed against the ache in his shoulder. "How did you find us?" Hart looked at the burned smell still hanging in the air. "We saw smoke," he said, "same as Ezra did, and we found Pike's men down the slope. 2 of them were willing to talk once they realized Pike wasn't coming back. They told us where you were headed." Quote, May closed her eyes like she was fighting tears. "Finch will come again?" Hart shook his head. "Not this time," he said. "We have warrants. We have witnesses. We have men ready in Billings. Finch is going to learn that money can't buy the whole world." Leanne took a breath, and it came out broken. "Are we safe?" Hart's voice softened. "You are safe tonight," he said, "and tomorrow we take statements. We do it right. After that, nobody gets to drag you anywhere." The fight was over, but the shaking did not leave their bodies right away. Ezra's wife brought blankets and hot coffee. Ezra's boys stood guard outside until morning. Thaddeus finally sat down, and May and Leanne sat near him like they were afraid the world might steal him too if they blinked. In the days that followed, Marshal Hart kept his word. He took Rourke and the others in chains. He rode to town with May and Leanne under federal protection. He sent word to Billings, and within a week the talk in every saloon was the same. Finch was arrested. Men in suits were suddenly not so proud when the law showed up with iron papers and harder eyes. Thaddeus healed slow. His shoulder would never feel the same again. Some mornings it burned so bad he had to bite down on a strip of leather to keep from groaning. But he got back on his feet because the world did not pause for pain. When the snow started to melt, Ezra rode with him back up the mountain. The Blackwood cabin was gone. Only the stone chimney still stood, black and stubborn against the sky. Charred beams lay half buried in slush. The place looked like a grave. May and Leanne stood beside Thaddeus in the ruined yard. For a moment, none of them spoke. Leanne's eyes filled. "I am sorry," she whispered. "This happened because of us." Thaddeus stared at the chimney, then at the wide land around it. "This happened because men thought they could own what ain't theirs," he said. "That's not on you." May took a slow breath. "What will you do?" Thaddeus looked at the mountain wall that had once protected his home. He had built that cabin for one man who wanted no more heartbreak. But the truth had changed, and it would not change back. "We build again," he said. Ezra grunted. "Good," he said, "because my boys are bored without a project." They set up canvas tents and started cutting new timber. May and Leanne worked like they had been born in this country, hauling boards, cooking meals, mending shirts, and keeping the fire alive. They still wore their red scarves, not like ornaments, but like a promise. They were not owned. They were not running anymore. They were choosing. One evening, when the new cabin frame stood tall against a pink sunset, Thaddeus sat on a stump, watching the twins hammer nails in perfect rhythm. He felt something in his chest that had once been dead. May and Leanne walked over, their faces smudged with work, their eyes bright with life. "You could leave," Thaddeus said quietly. "Finch is gone. You could go anywhere." May looked at Leanne. Leanne looked at May. Then they both looked at him. "We are tired of running," May said. "We are tired of being afraid," Leanne added. Thaddeus swallowed hard. His voice came out rough. "I'm not an easy man," he said. "I got scars. I got habits. I got a way of living that don't make room for much." May stepped closer. "You made room," she said. Leanne's eyes shined. "You opened a door." Thaddeus reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 simple silver bands he had hammered from old coins. His hands shook a little, not from cold, but from the weight of what he was about to ask. "I don't know how to say this clean," he said. "I've spent years telling myself I don't need anybody." He looked at them, at the same face in 2 places, and felt his heart split and heal at once. "I never had a wife," he said, and the words sounded like the old lie he had lived with. "I told myself that was better." Then he held out the rings. "But I don't want to end my days alone," he said. "Not after this, not after you." May's eyes filled first. Leanne's did too. They took the rings with shaking fingers and nodded at the same time. "Yes," they said together. A month later, Marshal Hart passed through again with a circuit judge who owed Ezra a favor. The judge did not ask many questions. He saw a man who had bled for 2 women and 2 women who had fought to stay free. He saw a home being rebuilt from ashes. They stood in front of the new cabin walls, half finished but strong. Ezra's family stood nearby. The mountains watched in silence like they always did. Thaddeus spoke his vows simple. May and Leanne spoke theirs in steady voices that did not shake anymore. When it was done, the judge cleared his throat and said, "I've seen worse choices made for worse reasons. Live honest. Live kind. That's all that matters." That night, under a sky full of sharp stars, Thaddeus sat on a porch swing he had just hung. May sat on his left. Leanne sat on his right. Their heads rested on his shoulders, and the wind that once sounded like a warning now sounded like music. Thaddeus looked out at the dark peaks and finally let the truth settle into his bones. "I never had a wife," he murmured again. May squeezed his hand. Leanne squeezed the other. "Now you do," they whispered. "If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it. so more people can find these Wild West tales.